This is the Love Series, 14 poems in 14 days to celebrate Valentine's Day. It seems to me that love is not about providing, and love is not about consuming. It seems to me that love is about both of these things, but probably not in equal measure, and certainly not both at the same time. I think people have a very hard time doing both of those at the same time. So, how do we find that balance when our lover needs to consume love, or our lover is able and willing to provide love and sync those things up? We have a poem today that is about, I think, the struggle in that domain. Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Fort, and we are here for another poetry discussion, which will appear in 3 separate playlists here on the channel. Number 1 being the Poetry Discussion playlist, now over 625 videos strong. Number 2 being the Love Series, 14 love poems in 14 days to celebrate Valentine's Day and explore the theme of love itself. And number 3 being the Rainier Maria Rilke playlist here on the channel. The poem in question today is known simply as Love Song, and it reads as such. How can I keep my soul in me so that it doesn't touch your soul? How can I raise it high enough past you to other things? I would like to shelter it among remote, lost objects in some dark and silent place that doesn't resonate when your depths resound. Yet everything that touches us, me and you, takes us together like a violin's bow, which draws one voice out of 2 separate strings. Upon what instrument are we 2 spanned? And what musician holds us in his hand? Oh, sweetest song. So I'm going to read the poem a second time, but I'm going to tell you why. I think that this poem ends in a very surprising place. In fact, maybe not ends. I think the second half of this poem really is a very surprising direction from where we start. I don't think that the beginning couplet, the beginning 4 lines, 5 lines, really lead us down the path of a poem that ends with the statement that we are of one note, you and I. This beginning, how can I keep my soul in me so that it does not touch your soul? How can I raise it high enough past you to other things? Seems very standoffish for sort of the modern concept of love. But I think the discussion today will lead us down a path that lets us know that this is not the case, that this is an intuitive type of love regardless. So, from the top, how can I keep my soul in me so that it doesn't touch your soul? How can I raise it high enough past you to other things? I would like to shelter it among remote lost objects in some dark and silent place that doesn't resonate when your depths resound. Yet everything that touches us, me and you, takes us together like a violin's bow, which draws one voice out of 2 separate strings. Upon what instrument are we 2 spanned? And what musician holds us in his hand? Oh, sweetest song. If you get into the space of poetry and trying to figure out poetry, trying to figure out what poetry is, you will find no shortage of definitions. And yet every definition that you will find falls short in myriad ways. Every definition that you find trying to really pinpoint what poetry is, in my opinion, gets either too close, trying to make it so that poetry is a single thing that does a single function, or is so wishy-washy that it doesn't really justify repeating. Oh, poetry is that which voices emotion. There's no what? There's no use in that definition. I think somewhere in the middle, you can find a lot of definitions that really provide purchase on what poetry is, really give us a little bit of grasp on what poetry is and does. One thing that I think goes too far is to insist that poetry is metaphor, because I think that excludes interpretation. I think that all poetry can be used as metaphor, but it does not have to be written with metaphor, and it does not have to be interpreted with metaphor. Poetry can simply be used to describe something in an impressive way. The definition that I'm going to give right now, however, utilizes the term metaphor, because it is a definition useful for interpretation, in my opinion. Poetry is the distillation of thought into metaphor through words. I think that in the eye of the critic, the eye of interpretation, it is always a useful starting point to assume that there is a metaphor embedded in a poem. I don't think you have to have it there. But for an interpretation, for a critic of poetry, it's not a bad starting point to assume metaphor into the poem. So, poetry is the distillation of thought into metaphor through words. That is not an image, right? If you're distilling it through an image, that's photography, that's film, that's painting. But through words makes it poetry. So, on the highest order, poetry is in the thought folder as we dig through our mind like an operating system on a computer. Imagine your mind as a Microsoft processor. Poetry is a folder inside the folder known as thought. It's a type of thought. And I really like the description of surprising and unique thoughts as shiny. You've probably, if you've been on this channel for any period of time, heard me describe a poem as shiny, describe a thought as shiny, so for example, hauntology is to me a very shiny word because it has a lot of interesting and unique things inside what hauntology is, how hauntology can be employed, etc. One of my favorite lyrics of all time comes from Lil Wayne in a song that he did with, I'm going to forget the title of the song, but it was with Eminem and Drake and Kanye. I think there was someone else in there. One of the things that he says is, my thoughts are shiny, or my mind is shiny even when my thoughts seem dark. How can that be? Your thoughts are dark, but your mind is shiny. Well, it's because your thoughts can be about dark things, can be about sort of the nastiness of life, but still you are using a unique and surprising way of approaching those thoughts. A great way to see interesting thoughts in practice is to read the metaphysical poets. Unique observations in those poems are filtered through surprising images. Obviously, again, the term image is an image created through words, but unique observations filtered through surprising images. John Donne talks about the idea of love and making love, really, is no more invasive, is no more profane than a tick that draws some blood from me, then crawls over to you and draws some blood there. It's very natural, right? All of these things. That is a unique observation filtered through a surprising image, the image of the flea. Did I say tick? I meant flea if I did. And I think John Donne himself would love to have chewed on this poem for a little while. This poem is part of the Love series here on the channel, and the first poem, Awake Ye Muses 9 by Emily Dickinson, was a naive, perhaps an exuberant and youthful look at the idea of love, something that is very easy to connect to, a type of love that is very pure. The second poem in this series, a love song by William Carlos Williams, leaves us with a feeling perhaps of melancholy. It is a forlorning type of love. It is an unrequited type of love. But this poem is something different even than those two ideas of love. This is a love so strong that it leaves our speaker yearning for their own individuality. How can I keep my soul in me? How can I keep that part of myself so that it does not touch your soul, so that it does not become yours, so that it does not become just a part of you, or perhaps rather a part of us? How do I not let me be a subset of us? To return to the Microsoft operating system analogy from earlier, where poetry is a folder inside the thought folder, this poem is saying, hey, the me folder is inside the us folder. Instead of the us folder being inside the me folder, the folder titled me is inside the folder titled us. And I'm not sure I like that. This, again, might seem to be standoffish, might seem to be a yearning for separation, and in some ways it is from the lover. But does that mean it's unhealthy? Does that mean it is an unhealthy idea for the idea of us? Does that mean it is an unhealthy idea about a relationship? I don't think it is. If there is, so I think the sort of ethos behind this poem is, the driving force here is, if there is no me outside of us, how can I provide to you? If the me folder is inside the us folder, everything of me is already you, and you could just access that on your own. But if the me involved in the us is greater than that, is part of an individual, then when you are in need, I can provide. You need love, I can give it. When I need love, you can give it. But if the me folder is inside the us folder, and I find myself in need, or you find yourself in need, well, we're really kind of stuck, aren't we? Because there's no me outside of us, there is no you outside of us, so the providing portion of the relationship can never really happen. That is all I have for this poetry discussion. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to. Share this video with other literature lovers. If you find yourself here by chance but not design, literature is the only thing I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos every single week. There's poetry every Monday, and I hope to have you back for the next one.